The year was 2189, and humans had been part of the galactic community for almost 40 years. In that time, Earth had learned many hard lessons. The galaxy was not kind to new species. Most young civilizations were tested, pushed, and sometimes destroyed before they could grow strong. Humanity had survived the testing. It had survived border skirmishes with the Dravith Empire, trade wars with the Kolnari Union, and even a short but bloody conflict with pirate clans near the Kessler Belt. Through all of this, humans built a reputation. They were called stubborn. They were called unpredictable. Some species called them dangerous, not because humans had the biggest fleet or the strongest weapons, but because humans never seemed to know when they were supposed to lose. Now Earth was about to do something that would shock the entire galaxy. At the Sol shipyards, floating high above Earth's atmosphere, a new ship waited in silence. It was called the Ashfall. Its hull was black, darker than the space around it, and it seemed to swallow the light from nearby stars instead of reflecting it. It had no visible cannons. It had no missile bays. It had no shield emitters that anyone could detect. Every scanner that passed over it, human or alien, returned strange results. Some said the ship was empty. Some said it was a decoy. Others whispered that it was something else entirely, something new, something that even Earth's own engineers did not fully understand. The public called it a warship because it was built by the Earth Defense Fleet, and it was headed toward the border with the Threk Assembly, a region of space where tensions had been rising for months. But officially, the Earth government called the Ashfall an escort and observation vessel. No one outside a small circle of scientists and officers knew what that meant. Captain Elena Voss stood on the bridge of the Ashfall, looking out at the stars through the main viewport. She was 42 years old, with short dark hair streaked with gray, and eyes that had seen more combat than most officers twice her age. She had fought in the Kessler Belt conflict. She had commanded a destroyer during the tense standoff with the Dravith Empire 3 years earlier. She was chosen to command the Ashfall, not because she was the most experienced captain in the fleet, though she was close, but because she was known for staying calm when everyone else around her wanted to panic. "Status report," she said, her voice steady. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chen, her second in command, looked up from his console. "All systems nominal, Captain. Engines are at full readiness. We are cleared for departure in 10 minutes. And the passengers?" "Settled in. Dr. Okafor asked me to remind you that the equipment, needs to remain undisturbed during the jump. No sudden maneuvers unless absolutely necessary." Elena nodded. She did not fully understand what Dr. Amara Okafor and her team had installed in the lower decks of the ship. Few people did. She only knew that it had taken 3 years to build, that it had cost more than any single project in human history, and that the President of the United Earth Council had personally signed the order to send it to the Threk border. "Take us out, Commander." The Ashfall moved slowly at first, gliding away from the shipyard like a shadow detaching itself from a wall. Then, once clear of the station, its engines flared to life, and the black ship shot forward into the darkness of space. 3 weeks later, the Ashfall arrived at the edge of Threk Assembly territory. This was contested space, claimed by both humans and the Threk, and for the past 6 months, it had been the site of growing tension. Threk merchant ships had been harassed by unknown raiders. Human colony ships had been turned away by Threk patrols. Diplomats on both sides had exchanged angry words, but so far, no shots had been fired. Everyone knew that could change at any moment. The Threk were not like humans. They were tall, thin beings, with pale gray skin, and 4 eyes arranged around their heads, giving them nearly total vision in every direction, except directly behind them. A weakness their culture had turned into deep superstition. They were an old species, older than humanity by tens of thousands of years, and they had built one of the largest fleets in this part of the galaxy. Their ships were sleek and fast, built for speed and precision strikes rather than heavy armor. They respected strength, but they respected caution even more. Their history was full of stories about species who had grown too proud and been erased. Admiral Threth Kaval commanded the Threk fleet stationed at the border. He was old by Threk standards, nearly 300 years, and he had commanded fleets during 2 major wars. He did not like surprises. When his sensor officer alerted him to an unknown ship entering the border zone, he expected another human patrol vessel, small and quick, there to gather information and leave. What he saw instead made him sit up straight in his command chair. "Say that again," he said. "Sir, the ship is... We cannot get a clear reading. Our scanners show a hull mass consistent with a heavy cruiser, but the internal structure is not resolving. It is like trying to scan a hole in space." "Weapons signature?" "None detected, sir. No cannons, no missile launchers, no shield generators that we can identify. But, sir..." The sensor officer paused, his 4 eyes blinking in confusion. "The power readings from the ship are enormous. Far beyond what a ship this size should need if it has no weapons or shields." Admiral Cavall leaned forward. "Enormous how?" "We cannot say for certain. Our instruments keep giving different numbers each time we scan. It is almost as if the ship does not want to be measured." Cavall felt a chill run through him, an old instinct passed down through generations of Threk who had learned to fear the unknown more than the powerful. A ship with big guns was dangerous, but it was understandable. A ship that could not be understood at all was something else entirely. "Hail them," he ordered. "I want to know what they are doing here." Aboard the Ashfall, Elena received the incoming transmission request and nodded to her communications officer, a young woman named Priya Nandan, to accept it. The image that appeared on the main screen showed Admiral Cavall, his gray face stern, his 4 eyes all focused on the camera at once, which Elena had learned over the years was a sign of serious attention among the Threk. "This is Admiral Threth Cavall, of the Threk Assembly Defense Fleet. You have entered contested territory. Identify yourself and state your purpose." "Admiral Cavall," Elena said, keeping her tone calm and respectful. "This is Captain Elena Voss, of the Earth vessel Ashfall. We are here on a peaceful mission of observation, in accordance with the border agreement signed between our 2 governments last year. We do not intend to cause any conflict." Cavall's eyes narrowed slightly, a Threk expression of suspicion. "Your ship carries no visible weapons, yet its power output is far beyond what a simple observation vessel should require. Explain this." Elena had been briefed on exactly how to answer this question, though she did not know the full truth herself. The Ashfall uses advanced systems still in testing. I am not authorized to share technical details, but I can assure you that we have no offensive intentions. We are simply here to monitor the border, as your own patrol ships do. There was a long pause. Cavall studied her face, searching for some sign of deception. Humans were hard to read. Their faces did not move the way Threk faces did, and their eyes did not glow with the same colors that betrayed Threk emotion. But something about this human captain's steady voice made him uneasy in a way he could not name. "Very well, Captain Voss. Your ship will be monitored closely. Any hostile action will be met with immediate response." "Understood, Admiral. We expect nothing less." The transmission ended. Cavall sat back in his chair, his mind racing. He looked at his tactical officer, a broad-shouldered Threk named Desic who had served under him for over 100 years. "What do you make of it?" Desic's eyes flickered with uncertainty, a rare sight for him. "Admiral, I do not like this. A ship with no visible weapons should not concern us. But everything about this vessel feels wrong. The way it moves, the way it refuses to be scanned properly. I recommend caution." "I agree," Cavall said quietly. "Increase patrols around the ship, but do not provoke it. Let us watch, and let us learn." Back on the Ashfall, Marcus Chen approached Elena at her station. "That went about as well as expected, Captain." "They're scared," Elena said. "Not of what we have, of what they can't see. Is that the idea? Scare them without doing anything?" Elena glanced toward the door leading down to the lower decks, where Dr. Okafor's team worked in near-total secrecy. "I don't fully know what Okafor's team built down there, Marcus. I've been told enough to do my job, and not one word more. But I trust the people who sent us here, and I trust that whatever this ship is carrying, it's meant to keep the peace, not break it." "You really believe that?" "I have to," Elena said. "Because if I'm wrong, a lot of people are going to die out here, starting with us." Marcus said nothing, but his jaw tightened. Around them, the crew of the Ashfall continued their work, quiet and focused, unaware that 3 decks below them, in a chamber sealed behind 3 layers of security doors, something waited that would decide the fate of 2 civilizations. Over the following days, the Ashfall held its position at the border, moving in slow, predictable patterns, designed to appear as unthreatening as possible. Threk patrol ships circled at a cautious distance, their sensors constantly probing, constantly failing to get a clear picture of what they were dealing with. Admiral Cavall reported the situation to the Threk Assembly High Council, who debated for 2 full days about how to respond. Some council members wanted to demand the ship's immediate withdrawal. Others wanted to send a larger fleet to intimidate the humans into retreating. A smaller group, quieter but no less influential, urged patience. They remembered old stories, passed down since before written history, warnings about the danger of striking first against something you did not understand. The Threk had learned this lesson the hard way once before, in a conflict so old that most modern Threk considered it myth rather than history. That conflict had a name, whispered only in old texts and cautionary tales told to young Threk pilots before their first deployment. They called it the Silent War. No modern Threk truly knew what had happened during the Silent War, only that it had cost their species dearly, and that the enemy in that ancient conflict had also appeared, at first, to be helpless. Admiral Cavall remembered the story. He had heard it as a child, and he had dismissed it as superstition for most of his long life. But now, staring at the strange black ship on his view screen, he found himself wondering if the old stories held more truth than he had ever believed. He gave his orders carefully. No one fires on that ship without my direct command. We watch, we wait, and we do not give them a reason to reveal whatever it is they are hiding. 300 kilometers away, aboard the Ashfall, Elena Voss stood alone in her quarters that night, looking at a small data pad that contained her most recent orders from Earth Command. The orders were simple, and they had been repeated to her 3 times before launch, as if Earth Command wanted to make absolutely sure she understood them. Do not fire first. Do not reveal the nature of the cargo unless the ship is directly threatened with destruction. Your presence alone is the mission. She read the words again, then set the pad down and looked out her small viewport at the distant lights of the Threk patrol ships. Somewhere out there, in the dark, an entire alien civilization was trying to decide whether to attack a ship that could not shoot back. And somewhere 3 decks below her, something was waiting. She did not know exactly what Dr. Okafor's team had built. She only knew 3 things. It had taken every resource Earth could spare for 3 years. It required no weapons, no shields, and no offensive systems of any kind to make the Ashfall the most important ship in the history of human space exploration. And whatever it was working, because for the first time in living memory, an alien fleet with overwhelming firepower was too afraid to fire on a nearly empty human ship. Elena closed her eyes and allowed herself, just for a moment, to wonder what exactly Earth had built. Then she pushed the thought away, because in 3 more days, according to the mission timeline she had been given, she would finally find out. And so would the Threk Dr. Amara. Okafor had not slept properly in 3 days. She sat in the small control room deep inside the Ashfall, surrounded by screens, showing readings that made sense to almost no one else on the ship. She was 55 years old, with silver hair tied back tightly, and she had spent the last 20 years of her career studying something that most scientists on Earth still refused to believe was real. Her project was called, officially, the Resonance Initiative. Unofficially, among the small circle of people who knew about it, it was called the Whisper Project, because of what it did. 12 years earlier, a deep space probe near the edge of human territory had picked up a signal unlike anything humanity had ever recorded. It was not a message in the traditional sense. It carried no words, no images, no code that could be translated in any normal way. Instead, it seemed to interact directly with the structure of space itself, creating ripples that could be detected by gravity sensors light years away. Scientists spent years trying to understand it before Amara's team made a breakthrough. The signal was not communication. It was closer to a kind of pressure, a wave that pressed against reality in a way that other advanced technology could sense, even if it could not fully decode it. Amara's team learned to reproduce a small version of this effect. They called the device that generated it the resonance core, and it sat now in the sealed chamber, 3 decks below Captain Voss's quarters, humming quietly, using more power than the rest of the Ashfall combined. What the resonance core did was simple to describe, but impossible to fully explain, even to the people who had built it. It did not attack. It did not defend. It simply made itself known to any sufficiently advanced sensor system, radiating a signature that suggested unimaginable power, without actually being a weapon at all. To a species with primitive technology, the ashfall would look like an ordinary ship, but to a species like the Threk, whose sensors could detect the deepest layers of space-time distortion, the ship radiated something that felt, on an instinctive level, like standing next to something ancient and impossibly strong. It was not a lie, exactly. The power was real. The signature was real. It was simply not a weapon in the way the Threk assumed. It was a mirror, reflecting back at them a shape built from their own fears. Amara had tried to explain this to Captain Voss once, during a private briefing before launch. "Think of it like this," she had said. "Imagine you're walking through a dark forest, and you hear something large moving in the trees. You don't know what it is. Your mind fills in the details. Maybe it's a predator. Maybe it's something worse. Your fear does most of the work, not the thing in the trees. Our device does something similar, except instead of your mind, it works directly on the sensors and instruments of any species advanced enough to detect it. So it's a bluff," Elena had said. "It's more than a bluff. The power output is completely real. If anyone tried to physically probe it, tried to attack it directly, they would discover something is really there, generating real energy, doing something real to the fabric of space around it. We simply do not yet know exactly how to weaponize that energy ourselves. But they don't know that. All they know is that something enormous and unexplainable is sitting quietly in a ship that refuses to explain itself." Elena had frowned. "And if they call the bluff? If they attack it directly to find out what it really is?" Amara had been quiet for a long moment before answering. "Then we will find out together what the resonance core actually does under direct assault. We have theories, we do not have certainty." That conversation echoed in Elena's mind now, 3 weeks into the mission, as she watched the Threk patrol ships circle the ashfall like nervous predators, unsure whether they had found prey or a threat. Aboard Admiral Kaval's flagship, the Vithara, tension was rising. 3 more Threk ships had arrived at the border, doubling the fleet's strength. Yet despite the increased numbers, the mood among the officers had not improved. If anything, it had grown worse. "Admiral," Desic said, standing at the tactical station, "I have completed a deeper analysis of the readings we've collected over the past week. I do not like what I found." "Show me." Desic pulled up a series of charts on the main display. "The power signature from the human ship does not behave like any weapon or shield system we have on record. It fluctuates in patterns that resemble something closer to a natural phenomenon, like a small black hole or a collapsing star, except contained and controlled. If this technology is what it appears to be, the humans have found a way to harness forces we do not fully understand ourselves." "Could it be a trick?" Kaval asked. "Some kind of illusion meant to frighten us?" "It is possible," Desic admitted. "But if it is an illusion, it is one that is fooling our most advanced sensor arrays completely. Either the humans possess technology and understanding, far beyond anything they have shown us before, or they have built a device capable of perfectly imitating that technology in every measurable way. I do not know which possibility frightens me more." Kaval rubbed the ridge above his upper eyes, a gesture of deep thought among his people. "Tell me about the Silent War, Desic. The old story. What do you remember of it?" Desic looked surprised by the question. "Admiral, that is ancient history, more legend than fact. I only know the version told to young pilots." "Tell me anyway." What Desic straightened. "The story says that many thousands of years ago, before our people had left our home system, we encountered another species during our first expansion into the stars. This species had ships that carried no visible weapons, much like the one we face now. Our ancestors, confident and eager to prove their strength, attacked without hesitation, believing an unarmed ship posed no threat. The story says that what happened next nearly ended our civilization. The details are lost to time, but the lesson survived. Never assume that a lack of visible weapons means a lack of danger. Sometimes, the ships without guns are the ones you should fear the most." Kaval nodded slowly. "That is the story I remember as well. I always believed it was meant only to teach caution to young officers, a fable and nothing more. But now I find myself unable to stop thinking about it. Do you believe the humans know this story, Admiral? Do you believe they are using it against us deliberately?" "I do not know," Kaval admitted, "but I do know this. Whether the story is true or not, whether the humans intend to frighten us with old legends or not, The readings from that ship are real, and I will not be the admiral who ignores 300 years of caution because of pride. The next day, the Threk Assembly High Council sent new orders to Admiral Kaval. A diplomatic envoy would be sent to speak directly with the human captain, in an attempt to resolve the situation without further escalation. Kaval was to escort the envoy safely and ensure no harm came to them, while also maintaining full readiness in case the talks failed. The envoy's name was Kasaleth Orun, a senior diplomat who had spent decades negotiating disputes across dozens of star systems. She arrived aboard a small shuttle, escorted by 2 Threk warships, and was received aboard the Ashfall with careful formality. Elena met her personally at the airlock, standing at attention alongside Marcus Chen and a small honor guard. "Envoy Orun," Elena said, extending a hand in the human gesture of greeting that she had been told the Threk found strange but not offensive. "Welcome aboard the Ashfall. We are honored by your visit." Orun studied Elena for a long moment with all 4 eyes before responding. "Captain Voss, I have read much about your species in preparation for this meeting. I confess, none of it prepared me for standing aboard this ship. The air here feels heavy. Is that a common human sensation, or am I imagining it?" Elena knew exactly what the diplomat meant. Everyone who came aboard the Ashfall, human or otherwise, seemed to feel it. A faint pressure in the air. A sense of something vast and quiet nearby. The crew had grown used to it after weeks aboard the ship, but new visitors always noticed. "I couldn't say for certain," Elena replied carefully. "Would you like to discuss the matter that brought you here?" They moved to a small conference room near the bridge. Orun sat across from Elena, her posture stiff and formal, while 2 aides remained standing near the door. "Captain Voss, I will speak plainly, as is the custom of my office. The Threk Assembly does not wish for conflict with Earth. We have watched your species since your first contact with the wider galaxy, and while you are young and, forgive my honesty, sometimes reckless, we have found you to be a species of your word. This is why I am here instead of a war fleet." "We appreciate that, Envoy Orun. Earth has no wish for conflict either." "Then explain to me," Orun said, leaning forward slightly, "what exactly your ship is doing here, and what it is carrying that has caused 300 years of Threk military doctrine to be thrown into confusion." Elena had prepared for this question, though she still felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. "I am not able to share the technical details of our equipment, Envoy. What I can tell you is this. The Ashfall is not here to attack anyone. It carries no weapons capable of striking your ships. Its purpose is to be present, to observe, and to demonstrate that Earth is capable of developing technology that even we do not yet fully understand ourselves." Orun's eyes flickered. A Threk expression that Elena had learned usually meant careful calculation. "That is either the most honest answer I have received in 40 years of diplomacy, or the most carefully constructed deception. I find I cannot tell which." "I understand the difficulty that puts you in," Elena said gently. "I wish I could make it easier. But I believe, if you give us time, you will see that Earth has no intention of using whatever this ship carries against your people, so long as your people do not force our hand." There was a long silence, then Orun sat back, her posture softening slightly. "Very well, Captain Voss. I will report to the High Council that Earth claims peaceful intent, and that your ship's true capabilities remain unknown, even to your own government's representatives here. I suspect this will not fully satisfy them, but it may buy us more time to avoid a mistake neither of our species can undo." As the envoy prepared to leave, she paused at the airlock and turned back to Elena. "Captain, may I ask you something personal, outside the formal record?" "Of course. Are you afraid? Commanding a ship that even you do not fully understand, sitting at the edge of a fleet that could destroy you at any moment." Elena considered the question carefully before answering. "Every day, Envoy Orun. But I trust the people who built this ship, and I trust that Earth would not have sent me here to die for nothing. Fear and trust are not opposites. Sometimes they have to exist together." Orun's 4 eyes studied her for a long moment. "That is a very human answer, Captain. I hope, for both our species, that your trust is not misplaced." She left without another word, and Elena stood alone at the airlock for a long time after the shuttle departed, watching the small craft shrink into the distance, carrying with it the fragile hope that war could still be avoided. 3 decks below her, the resonance core continued its quiet hum, radiating power that no one, human or Threk, truly understood. Not every Threk officer agreed with Admiral Kaval's caution. Commander Vesic Thorn had served in the Threk fleet for over 150 years, and in all that time, he had never once seen his people back down from a confrontation the way they were backing down now. He commanded the Ferox, a mid-sized cruiser stationed at the edge of the border fleet, and he had watched with growing frustration as Admiral Kaval ordered patrol after patrol, scan after scan, and negotiation after negotiation, while the strange human ship sat unbothered at the heart of contested space. "It is a trick," he told his crew during a private briefing in his ready room. "A single ship, unarmed, sitting in the middle of our territory, and we treat it like a god descended from the old stories. This is not caution. This is cowardice, dressed up as wisdom." His weapons officer, a younger Threk named Ysira, shifted uncomfortably. "Commander, the Admiral has his reasons. The readings from that ship are unlike anything in our records." "Readings can be faked," Vesic snapped. "Numbers on a screen mean nothing if no one has the courage to test them. I say we find out what that ship truly is, before the Assembly signs away half our border out of fear of a shadow." He did not share this plan with Admiral Kaval. He knew it would be forbidden immediately. Instead, 3 days after Envoy Orun's meeting with Captain Voss, while the fleet's attention was focused on ongoing negotiations, Vesic ordered the Ferox to break formation under the cover of a routine patrol rotation, and he set a course directly toward the ashfall. Aboard the human ship, alarms began to sound softly on the bridge. "Captain, we have a contact breaking away from the main Threk formation," Priya Nandan reported, her voice tight with concern. "It's moving fast. Direct approach vector. Weapon systems powering up." Elena was in the command chair instantly, though she had never truly left it in the weeks since arriving at the border. "Identify. Threk cruiser. Designation matches the Ferox, part of Kaval's fleet." "Captain, this isn't part of any pattern we've seen before. This looks deliberate." Marcus appeared at her side. "Orders, Captain?" Elena's mind raced through her options in the span of 2 seconds. Her orders were clear. Do not fire first. Do not reveal the ship's true capabilities, unless directly threatened with destruction. But a single cruiser breaking formation, and charging weapons, was not yet a direct threat to the ship's survival, not with the Ashfall's unknown defenses, whatever they truly were. "Hold position," she said. "Hail them. Let's find out what they think they're doing, before we assume the worst." The transmission connected almost instantly, but instead of an image, only a harsh, clipped voice came through. "Human vessel. This is Commander Vesic Thorn, of the Ferox. You will power down whatever system you are using to falsify your sensor readings, or I will consider this an act of aggression against the Threk Assembly." Elena kept her voice level. "Commander Thorn, we are not falsifying anything, and we have taken no hostile action against your fleet. I suggest you return to your formation before this misunderstanding becomes something neither of us wants." "I have had enough of misunderstandings," Vesic growled. "I intend to test your ship's true capabilities directly. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear." The transmission cut off. "Captain, the Ferox is charging its main weapons array," Priya said, her voice rising. "Targeting solution locked on our hull." Elena felt her pulse quicken, but her voice remained steady. Years of combat experience had taught her that panic was the enemy, long before any weapon fired. "All hands, brace for impact. Marcus, get me Dr. Okafor, now." Down in the sealed chamber, 3 decks below, Amara Okafor had already seen the alert on her own console. Her hands moved quickly over her controls, though her face remained a mask of calm concentration, built from years of preparing for exactly this moment. "Captain," she said over the comm, "the resonance core is fully active. It has been active since we entered Threk space. If they fire on us, the core will do what it does. I cannot promise you the outcome, but I do not believe we are in danger of destruction." "You don't believe," Elena repeated. "That's not exactly comforting, Doctor." "It's the truth, Captain. That's all I can offer you right now." On the Ferox, Vesic Thorn stared at the black shape of the ashfall on his view screen. His 4 eyes narrowed with a mixture of determination and, though he would never admit it, a flicker of fear he refused to acknowledge. "Fire," he ordered. The Ferox's main cannon released a bolt of concentrated plasma energy, streaking across the black void of space, directly toward the human ship's hull. What happened next would be studied, argued over, and retold across a dozen star systems for years to come. The plasma bolt struck the Ashfall's hull, and for a fraction of a second, the entire ship seemed to shimmer, its dark surface rippling like the surface of a pond struck by a stone. But instead of an explosion, instead of the hull cracking or venting atmosphere into space, the energy of the blast simply dispersed. It spread outward across the hull in a wave of faint blue light, absorbed into the ship's structure, as if it had never been fired at all. No damage, no breach, no visible reaction beyond that single, silent ripple of light. On the bridge of the Ferox, Vesic stared at his sensor readings in stunned disbelief. "That's impossible. Impossible," confirmed the hit. "Confirmed, Commander," Ysera said, her voice shaking. "Direct hit. Full power discharge. The target shows no damage. No shield signature detected before or during impact. The energy simply disappeared into the hull." Vesic's mind reeled. A shield would have flared with visible energy, a distinct barrier absorbing the blast. Armor would have shown scoring, heat damage, something. But this was neither. It was as if the Ashfall had simply eaten the attack and asked for more. Aboard the Ashfall, the crew held their breath, watching their own damage readouts. Marcus stared at his console in disbelief. "Captain, we took a direct hit. No damage. No damage at all." Elena exhaled slowly, forcing her hands to stop trembling before anyone could notice. "Dr. Okafor, report." "The core absorbed the energy discharge and redistributed it across the hull matrix," Amara said, her voice tight with barely restrained excitement. "Captain, this is beyond anything we tested in simulations. The theoretical models suggested partial absorption at best. This was complete. 100% energy neutralization. Can it do that again? Against something bigger?" There was a pause. "I don't know, Captain. We've never tested it against a sustained assault or a larger weapon. I would not recommend finding out unless we have no other choice." On the bridge, Elena made her decision. She opened a direct channel to the Ferox, her voice carrying a calm authority that masked the storm of adrenaline still running through her body. "Commander Thorne, you have fired on a vessel of the United Earth Council without provocation, in direct violation of the current border agreements. I strongly suggest you stand down before this incident escalates beyond either of our control." There was a long silence before Vesic responded, his voice noticeably less confident than before. You did not fire back." "We had no need to," Elena said simply. "Stand down, Commander." Word of the incident reached Admiral Cavall within minutes, and his reaction was immediate and furious. He personally ordered Vesic Thorne's cruiser recalled to the main fleet formation, and relieved him of command on the spot, a punishment that would end the commander's career, and, in Threk military tradition, bring lasting shame to his family line. But Cavall's anger at Vesic's insubordination was matched only by his own growing dread at what the incident had revealed. He reviewed the sensor data personally, watching the recording of the plasma bolt vanishing harmlessly into the Ashfall's dark hull over and over again. "Desic," he said quietly, standing alone with his tactical officer in the command center late that night. "In 300 years of service, I have seen shields fail. I have seen armor hold. I have never seen an attack simply disappear." "Nor have I, Admiral," Desic admitted. "What do we do now?" Cavall was silent for a long moment, staring at the frozen image of the Ashfall on the screen, its dark hull rippling with that faint, impossible blue light. "We do exactly what we should have done from the beginning. We stop trying to test them, and we start trying to understand them. Prepare a formal message to the High Council. Tell them what happened here today. Tell them that whatever the humans have built, it is beyond anything in our arsenal, and that our next move must be made with wisdom, not pride." "And Captain Voss?" Cavall considered the question for a long time before answering. "Prepare a personal message to her as well. I believe, Desic, that it is time the admiral of this fleet had an honest conversation with the human captain, without pretense, without threats. I believe we have both been fortunate today. I do not wish to test that fortune a second time." Far below, in the depths of the Ashfall, Amara Okafor sat alone in her control room, staring at data that no human being had ever seen before. Data showing exactly how the resonance core had responded to a direct, hostile attack. Her hands trembled slightly as she began recording her notes, aware that she was witnessing something that would change the course of human history. It worked, she whispered to herself. It actually worked. But even as relief washed over her, a small, nagging worry remained in the back of her mind. The Corps had absorbed one blast from one mid-sized cruiser without difficulty. But what would happen, she wondered, if an entire fleet decided to fire at once? She did not have to wait long to find out. News of the failed attack spread through the Threk assembly faster than Admiral Kaval could control. Within 2 days, every major news channel across Threk space carried some version of the story, though the details grew more exaggerated with each retelling. Some reports claimed the human ship had swallowed the Ferox's plasma bolt and grown stronger from it. Others claimed the humans had unlocked ancient forbidden technology from the silent war itself. The truth, strange and half understood even by the humans who built it, was somehow less frightening than the rumors. The Threk Assembly High Council convened an emergency session. 12 council members, representing different regions of Threk space, argued for nearly 6 hours about how to respond. Some demanded an immediate, overwhelming show of force, a full fleet assault to destroy the human ship before its technology could spread further, or be used against them directly. Others, remembering the old stories and now faced with undeniable proof that those stories might hold more truth than legend, argued for extreme caution and immediate diplomatic resolution. In the end, a compromise was reached, though it satisfied no one completely. The full border fleet, nearly 40 ships strong, would be moved into position around the Ashfall, a clear demonstration of Threk military strength. But no attack would be authorized without a direct, unanimous order from the High Council itself. In the meantime, Admiral Kaval was ordered to open a direct, high-level communication channel with Captain Voss, in a final attempt to resolve the crisis peacefully before matters escalated beyond anyone's control. Elena received the request for a direct channel with Admiral Kaval 2 days after the incident with the Ferox. She had spent those 2 days watching Threk ships gather around the Ashfall in ever greater numbers, until the black human vessel sat alone at the center of a fleet formation that could have, under different circumstances, ended human presence in this region of space in a matter of minutes. She accepted the call in her private ready room, wanting this conversation to happen without the pressure of an audience on the bridge. Admiral Kaval's image appeared on her screen, and for the first time since their first meeting, Elena noticed something different in his expression. The suspicion was still there, but it had been joined by something else. Respect, perhaps, or something closer to fear, held carefully in check. "Captain Voss," Kaval began, "I will not waste time with formalities. My fleet now surrounds your ship in overwhelming numbers. If the Threk Assembly High Council orders an attack, I do not believe your vessel, however remarkable, could withstand a coordinated assault from 40 warships firing simultaneously. I say this, not as a threat, but as a fact we must both acknowledge before we speak further." Elena kept her voice calm, though her heart was pounding. "I understand, Admiral. I appreciate you speaking plainly." "In turn," Kaval continued, "I ask you to speak plainly with me. What is aboard your ship? Not vague reassurances, not diplomatic language. I have watched your vessel absorb a direct plasma strike, as though it were nothing more than a light rain. I have reviewed 300 years of Threk military history, and I have found nothing that explains what I witnessed. I need to understand what we are truly facing, Captain, before I recommend a course of action to my council that could mean the deaths of thousands of my people, or the deaths of everyone aboard your ship." Elena was quiet for a long moment. She thought of her orders, the careful instructions from Earth Command about what could and could not be revealed. But she also thought of Envoy Arun's question at the airlock, and her own answer about fear and trust needing to exist together. She made a decision that was hers alone to make. "Admiral Kaval, I am going to tell you the truth, as much of it as I understand myself. I ask that what I share remains between us, for now, until our governments can determine how to proceed together. You have my word, Captain." "The Ashfall carries no weapons," Elena said. "That much is true, and it has always been true. What it carries instead is an experimental device, something our scientists call the resonance core. It generates a form of energy that we do not yet fully understand ourselves. We know that it can absorb and redistribute energy directed against the ship's hull, as you witnessed. We do not know its exact limits. We have never tested it against a sustained, large-scale assault, because we have never needed to, until now. Caval's 4 eyes studied her carefully. You are telling me that your own scientists do not know if this device could survive an attack from my full fleet. I am telling you exactly that, Admiral. I will not lie to you and claim certainty I do not have. What I can tell you is this. Earth did not send this ship here to start a war. We sent it here because our scientists believed, and our government agreed, that demonstrating strength without demonstrating aggression was the best path toward a peaceful resolution with a species we deeply respect. If your council orders an attack, and this ship fails, you will have your proof that the threat was smaller than it appeared. But I do not believe, Admiral, based on everything I have seen and heard from you, that this is truly what you want. Caval was silent for a long time, his gray face unreadable even to Elena, who had spent weeks learning to read Threk expressions. Finally he spoke, his voice quieter than before. Captain Voss, may I tell you something about my people that is not widely known outside our own historical records? Please. The story of the Silent War, which I mentioned to my officers, is not merely legend. There are fragments of historical record, buried deep in our oldest archives, that suggest it happened almost exactly as the old stories describe. An unarmed alien vessel, encountered during our earliest expansion into the stars. Our ancestors, confident in their strength, attacked without provocation. What followed was not destruction by the alien ship itself, but by a chain of events that our ancestors set into motion through their own aggression. A war that spanned generations and nearly ended our species before it had truly begun. The lesson our ancestors learned, the lesson that has shaped 300 years of Threk military doctrine since, is this. Strength does not always look like strength, and the greatest disasters in history often begin with someone underestimating what they do not understand. You believe I am telling you the truth, Elena said quietly. I believe, Caval said slowly, that you believe what you are telling me. Whether the full truth is even greater than what you understand yourself, I cannot say. But I have made my decision, Captain Voss. I will recommend to the High Council that we stand down our fleet, and that we open formal diplomatic channels between our governments to discuss what has happened here, openly and honestly, as equals. Relief flooded through Elena, though she kept her expression carefully controlled. Thank you, Admiral. I believe that is the wisest path for both our people. Do not thank me yet, Captain, Caval said, a note of dry humor entering his voice for the first time since they had met. I still must convince 12 council members who have spent the last 2 days demanding your destruction. That will not be an easy conversation. The High Council session that followed was, by all accounts, the most contentious in decades. Admiral Caval presented his findings, his recommendation, and his personal account of the conversation with Captain Voss. He spoke of the Silent War, dismissed for generations as mere legend, and argued that the fragments of historical truth behind that old story demanded caution now more than ever. Several council members remained unconvinced. One, a hardline representative from the outer colonies, argued forcefully that standing down now would be seen across the galaxy as weakness, inviting further human expansion into contested territory. We have the ships, he argued. We have the numbers. If this human weapon has limits, as the Admiral himself admits he cannot be certain it does not, then we should test those limits now, while we hold the advantage, rather than wait until the humans have perfected whatever this technology becomes. It was Envoy Orun, the diplomat who had first met with Captain Voss, who finally turned the tide of the debate. She stood before the council and spoke without notes, her voice carrying the weight of 40 years of diplomatic experience. I have met Captain Voss personally, she said. I have looked into her eyes, human eyes, that I have learned, over these past difficult weeks, are not so different from our own, in what they reveal. I saw no deception there. I saw fear. Yes, the fear of someone standing at the edge of a possible war, uncertain if she would survive it. But I also saw resolve, and I saw honesty. The humans have shown us restraint at every turn of this crisis. They did not fire on Commander Thorne's ship, even after being attacked without provocation. They did not use whatever power they possessed to threaten us, even when threatened themselves. I ask this council, honestly, when has fear alone ever led wisely? Let us not become the aggressors that our own oldest stories warn us against becoming. Let us instead become the wiser species, the one that learned from the past, instead of repeating it. The vote that followed was close, 7-5, but it was enough. The Threk Assembly High Council formally ordered the border fleet to stand down, and authorized Admiral Kaval to open direct diplomatic negotiations with Earth regarding the future of the contested border region. When Elena received the news, she allowed herself, for the first time in weeks, to fully exhale. She gathered her senior officers on the bridge, including Marcus Chen, and, for the first time since the mission began, Dr. Amara Okafor herself, summoned up from her sealed chamber, to witness this moment, alongside the crew, who had trusted her invention with their lives. "The Threk fleet is standing down," Elena announced. "Formal negotiations will begin within the week. We did it." A quiet cheer rippled across the bridge, restrained but heartfelt, the sound of people who had spent weeks living under the shadow of possible annihilation, finally allowing themselves to believe they might survive it. Amara Okafor stood near the back of the bridge, watching the crew celebrate, her mind still turning over the data from the Ferox incident, still wondering about the true limits of what she had built. But for now, at least, those questions could wait. "Dr. Okafor," Elena said, approaching her quietly amid the celebration. "I believe Earth owes you a great deal." Amara smiled, though it was a tired smile, carrying the weight of years of work finally proven worthwhile. "We got lucky, Captain. The Corps did more than we ever expected it to do, and we still do not fully understand why. Somewhere out there, someone smarter than me is going to spend the next 20 years figuring out exactly what we built." "Maybe," Elena said. "But today, it kept an entire alien fleet from destroying this ship, and maybe kept our two species from a war neither of us wanted. I'd call that a fair trade for not fully understanding it yet." Outside the ship, the Threk fleet began to withdraw, ship by ship, retreating to a respectful distance that signaled, for the first time in weeks, something other than imminent threat. And at the center of it all, the Ashfall sat quietly in the dark, its true nature still a mystery, even to the people who had built it, a black shape against the stars that had, against every expectation, become a symbol of peace instead of war. 6 months passed before the full story of the Ashfall's mission became public knowledge, and by then, it had already become something of a legend, told and retold across dozens of star systems in versions that grew stranger with each telling. Some versions claimed the ship had been powered by a captured star. Others claimed it carried the ghosts of an ancient, forgotten civilization. The true story, when it was finally released through official channels by both the Earth government and the Threk Assembly, was in many ways stranger than the myths, precisely because it was so carefully honest about what remained unknown. The formal negotiations between Earth and the Threk Assembly, led on the human side by a diplomatic team that included Captain Voss herself, resulted in a new border agreement, one built not on threats or shows of force, but on a foundation of mutual respect that neither species had expected to find with the other. Trade routes were opened, scientific exchange programs were established. Threk scholars traveled to Earth to study human history, fascinated by a species that had risen from a single small planet to become a serious power among the stars in less than 2 centuries. Human scientists, in turn, traveled to Threk space, eager to learn from a civilization tens of thousands of years older than their own. Admiral Kaval, promoted after the crisis for his steady leadership during the most dangerous days of the standoff, became one of the strongest voices for continued peace between the two species. He and Elena Voss maintained a formal correspondence for years afterward, two military commanders who had come dangerously close to war, and had instead found something closer to mutual respect. "I have thought often, these past months, about the silent war," Kaval wrote to her in one message, translated carefully by Threk linguists into human standard text. "For 300 years, my people treated that story as a warning against weakness, a reminder never to hesitate when facing an enemy. I understand now that we misread the lesson entirely. The warning was never about hesitation. It was about wisdom, about the danger of assuming that what we do not understand must therefore be simple, or weak, or beneath our caution. Your ship taught my people something we should have learned long ago on our own. I am grateful, Captain Voss, that the lesson did not cost either of our people the price my ancestors once paid." Elena kept that message for the rest of her career, printed on old-fashioned paper and framed in her quarters, a reminder of how close two civilizations had come to disaster, and how a single choice, made carefully and with courage, had turned that disaster into something else entirely. Dr. Amara Okafor spent the following years leading an expanded research division dedicated to understanding the resonance core more fully. The device that had saved the ashfall remained, in many ways, as mysterious to its own creators as it had first been. Amara's team discovered that the core's ability to absorb and redistribute energy had definite limits. Limits that, had Admiral Caval's full fleet actually fired upon the ashfall that day, might well have been exceeded. The humans had, in truth, been closer to disaster than almost anyone aboard the ship had realized at the time. This discovery, rather than being hidden, was shared openly with the Threk Assembly, as a gesture of continued trust between the two governments. Admiral Caval, upon learning how close his own hesitation had come to preventing a genuine catastrophe, rather than merely appearing cautious, reflected privately that fortune, as much as wisdom, had played its part in avoiding war that day. It was a truth that both species came to accept together, a shared understanding that made their new alliance stronger rather than weaker. Peace, they both agreed, was rarely built on certainty. More often, it was built on the courage to choose trust, before either side was entirely sure it was safe to do so. Years later, when new species encountered humanity for the first time, they often heard some version of the story of the Ashfall, the ship that carried no weapons and yet made an entire fleet hesitate. Human diplomats learned to tell the story carefully, emphasizing not the mystery of the resonance core, nor the tension of the standoff, but the final lesson that both Elena Voss and Admiral Caval had come to understand through their shared crisis. Strength, true strength, was not only measured in weapons or fleets or raw destructive power. Sometimes, the greatest strength a civilization could show was the patience to wait, the wisdom to listen, and the courage to choose peace, even when war seemed like the easier, safer choice. Elena Voss retired from active command 15 years after the Threk border crisis, having spent much of the following decade working in human diplomatic circles, helping to build the framework for peaceful contact protocols that Earth would use with dozens of species in the years that followed. She often thought back to those tense weeks aboard the Ashfall, sitting in the command chair, uncertain if the ship beneath her feet would survive the day, uncertain if her choices would lead her crew to peace or to disaster. At a ceremony marking her retirement, a young officer asked her what she believed had truly saved the Ashfall and prevented war with the Threk Assembly. Was it the resonance core? Was it luck? Was it the careful words exchanged between herself and Admiral Caval? Elena considered the question carefully before answering, the same way she had considered every decision during those long weeks at the border, all those years before. It was all of those things, she said, but if I had to choose one thing above all the others, I would say it was trust. Not blind trust, and not certainty, because we had neither of those things at the time. It was the willingness, on both sides, to trust that the other side might also want peace, even when every instinct told us to expect the worst. The resonance core kept us alive long enough to have that chance. But it was the choice to take that chance, made by people on both sides of that standoff, that truly saved us. She looked out at the young officers gathered before her, many of them not yet born, when the Ashfall first launched toward the Threk border all those years ago. Someday, she told them, you may find yourselves standing where I once stood, facing a fleet you cannot defeat, armed with nothing but the truth, and the hope that the people on the other side are wise enough to listen. When that day comes, remember this. Earth did not become respected among the stars because we carried the biggest guns or the strongest fleets. We earned that respect the day a ship with no weapons at all convinced an entire alien armada that peace was worth more than victory. That is the legacy I hope you carry forward, not the legend of a mysterious weapon, but the truth of what patience, honesty, and courage can accomplish, even in the darkest moments, even at the edge of war. The ceremony ended quietly, and Elena Voss stepped down from active service, her name added to the long list of officers who had shaped Earth's early years among the stars. But the story of the Ashfall, the dark ship that carried no weapons and yet made an alien fleet stand down without a single shot fired in anger, lived on, told and retold across the galaxy. A reminder that sometimes, the most powerful thing a civilization can build is not a weapon at all, but the wisdom to know when not to use one, and the courage to trust that peace, however uncertain, is always worth the risk of choosing it first. The end.